I'm excited. I get to talk to young people today that know more than me.
Well,
please, Tamika, you know you taught me everything.
Y'all young people know everything, but it's good to be with y'all. I'm sorry that I'm late. I just came out of My Black is Beautiful live discussion that was pretty heavy. At the end, we had a name calling, if you will, of many of the women that have been killed, people whose lives have been taken way too early, police violence, state-sanctioned violence. And we know some of the names, but there's a whole lot of names we don't know. And our sister Kylie Scales, who is the managing director of Black Lives Matter, was on specifically to talk about this list. And they actually illuminated a list of 100 women who've been killed by police on outside of a government building just during this time that all of the protests have been happening. And so it was pretty, just listening to the names, it hits you different. And that was immediately following having Pamela Turner, who was killed by police in Houston, Texas. She was, I don't know if you all remember the video where the woman said she was pregnant, and there was a whole bunch of hoopla about whether or not she lied and why did she say she was pregnant when she wasn't. And what I think and her daughter said is that at that moment, she think her mother was just basically saying anything that she could say to try to save her life, hoping that the officer would have mercy on her. But in the video, you clearly see that she's laying on the ground. She's no threat to him. She's not doing it. She's not up in his face. He could actually back up from her if he wanted to. But instead, he shot her in her stomach. He shot her in her chest, and he shot her underneath her eye. And listening to her daughter talk about how painful it was and how much they were afraid that they weren't even going to be able to have an open casket funeral for their mom. Like, people should just not be going through this. We should have to deal with it. There's no other community that deals with this, that has to suffer with this type of pain. And so tonight, being here to talk with you beautiful ladies about, Say Her Name, which is this movement, this real movement. Kimberly Crenshaw, who I think is one of my idols, someone I look up to. She has a whole study out called Say Her Name, where she talks about all the women, the list of women. And we're right in the middle of fighting for Breonna Taylor. And I'm here in Kentucky. We're going to be marching and rallying for her on Thursday. Angela, you have had Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And an incredible thing about these situations that God is so, and me, I'm all about me and my God. That's my homie. Okay. So anybody else that ain't their thing, I don't know what to tell you. That's my homie. And God works in mysterious ways, because even through pain, people come together and do things, and we see how the forces will bring us to our most powerful selves. Because Angela Yee and Angie Martinez got together and are worked together to bring forth the story of Breonna Taylor through her mother. And that was something you all had never done before, right, Angela?
Yeah, and kudos to you, Tamika, because you did put together the whole Zoom call with all these different women who work in the entertainment business, in the industry, also activists, and just kind of made sure you put the battery in everyone's back. Because I think with Breonna Taylor, we understand the story happened, a couple of years ago. And why are we just now? Yeah, I mean, a couple of months ago. And so why are we just now hearing about this? And why is this now just action being taken? But you see how powerful it can be once people hear the story and once that pressure gets put on.
Yes, absolutely. Also, I want to make sure to bring in the voices of these other young beauties. Kimberly, Latrice Jones. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us. Like I said, I want to hear from you all, because I listen to y'all's little lives and watch y'all's little social media posts. Y'all be out here popping, talking big junk. So, you are such an incredible leader, and can't wait to hear from you. Brea Baker, my little sister, who is in charge of all of our lives at Justice League NYC and so many other places and spaces, another young, great leader. went to Breanne, who was with us in the Women's March, another leader. I see Winter places. I'm like, Winter, why are you here? How did you get a ticket to this place? Like I had to beg somebody to get in. She be in the spots like all the time because she just is that powerful. Y'all are all such powerful women. And yes, you and I are old.
That's right.
Just need to admit it. We're old, but I think the wisdom of the wisdom of not so much the elders, but us as women who've been through this. You've been covering stories and relaying news and trying to help bring people closer to the importance of this moment and into the culture in ways that, like, everybody talks about the culture, and sometimes I'm like, what's the culture? Like, what exactly is the culture? Because sometimes people dumb it down so much, but I feel like our culture is about us being freedom fighters, about us being leaders and women who have been able to break barriers and change lives. And so you've been doing that, and I think when you put that with the fire and the courage of this generation, because this generation is like different. Amazing. Okay. And we don't want to cage it. We don't want to calm it down. We want it to be exactly as powerful as it is, because as time goes on, these young folks will also become a little older and they will have a different level of wisdom. But right now, the power that's out here on the streets is needed. So that's what I have to say. Say her name. Too many Black women. We ain't going to put up with it, and we're going to get justice one by one if that's what it takes. So I see you, Brea Baker, you shaking your head, and I know you have something powerful to say. So tell us, Brea. Teach us.
I'm shaking my head because I'm just like, yes. I mean, since I met you when I was like 20 years old, I've been obviously following you and following your guidance. But I think Angela Davis said it best when she said, a boost for Black women is a boost for every segment of society. And it discourages me when I see so much energy and it feels like, oh, this is such a new time. And yet we can get a law passed in Breonna's name, but we still don't have any accountability for the officers who killed her. Or as Black women are writing love letters to Black men and saying, we salute you, we here for you. We seeing Black women being thrown in dumpsters by Black men. And so it confuses me, because at one hand, we see so much power being built, so much possibility. And on the other hand, it's like same old, same old. So I'm excited for this conversation, because I think if anyone's going to have the answers, or at least be able to redirect us on what this cultural shift will need to look like. And to your point, what is the culture? What exactly needs to shift? But I think something needs to change, because Black women continuously show up. I mean, for Hillary, even when we didn't want to, in the 2018 midterms, even when we didn't see ourselves reflected everywhere, and now for this uprising, and yet who's coming for us? So I'm just excited to build with y'all and be a part of letting people know, like, how do you show up for us the way we show up for everybody?
That's so powerful. Kimberly, I mean, you went viral, right? Yeah. And that's a thing. Clearly, these days, a speech can make you go viral, and then, and people actually are listening. I have to say, I think COVID-19 has something to do with it. I think people are much more in tune. They're sitting at home, they're listening. They're struggling, feeling like folks, people don't know which way they're going to go, which way is society going to take them. And so they just happen to be in a space where their ears and eyes are open, and the world was open to hearing your message. So powerful, so powerful. I want you to talk about, what you said and how you feel in the context of Say Her Name, because I think the most important point you made was the deck is stacked against us. It's stacked against us. Yeah. So let's hear from you.
Well, I'm a person who's been a victim of police brutality twice myself. So I carry that. Like, you can't even get behind me in a car with a bike rack without me getting nervous. And nobody should have to live like that. Like, my sister shouldn't have to live like that. My brothers shouldn't have to live like that. And so in this moment, when I was talking about the Monopoly games, I was telling my big sister. I feel like I stopped talking at some point and the ancestors started talking for me, because there's been so many atrocities for so long that nobody has taken responsibility for. Like, nobody still took responsibility for the Elaine massacre. Nobody still took responsibility for Tulsa. Nobody still took responsibility for Rosewood, for Seneca Village, for Nova Scotia. I mean, I can name 30 cities where incidents like that took place, where we were slaughtered, where we were brutalized, and we continue to be slaughtered and brutalized. And when we talk about the murders, and those are super important, and we should uplift those voices and make sure that they receive justice. But as much as we talk about, even though we say Black lives, we get galvanized really around Black death. I want us to talk about the function of Black lives, because Black women are brutalized by police on a daily basis. When I was pregnant, right after I had my son, I had a police officer take my baby carrier out of my car and sit in oncoming traffic. You can't tell me that that would have happened to anybody else. You can't tell me that anybody else would have to sit in fear, knowing if their newborn was going to be hit by a car. And it's exhausting. And that day I was exhausted. And I really didn't care how people received my message. People started texting me like, you're an author, they're going to cancel you. I'm like, well, cancel me then. Because I don't care.
Yes.
Tamika said,
that's the reason they get canceled. What? That's right. That's my little line from Red Table Talk. If you don't get canceled, you ain't popping. Like, that's where we are. We're in a place where Black folks can't be trying to be politically correct. We just got to say what it is. And that's why my piece was, don't come to me talking about who's looting and who's vandalizing. I know those things are happening. No, it's not right. Yes, we will work on and make sure that our young people understand what we're here for and keep people focused. But first thing we got to talk about is the Black death. We got to talk about the trauma that created an environment for all these other things to happen. Because prior to this, people was in their homes. They're trying to figure out how they were going to survive with no job while 40 million Americans are not working. So don't come to me talking about all these other things that are symptoms of a big disease that exists. So Winter, just listening to all this power, knowing how powerful you are, and you often are speaking up about young Black women and what is happening to young Black women. I see you out there. What are you feeling? You feeling like people have been asking me, I'm so happy to be able to ask y'all, because I get the same question every panel. Do you feel like the tide is turning? Like people are getting it, finally?
I mean, I think, I think there's a couple things to that. I don't think anything's new under the sun. And I think that now we have things like cell phones and social media that helps amplify our voices. But at the same time, then we are also publicly seeing more attacks on that in those mediums. But I also think, like, for me, like this past week, and hearing about Oluwatolin's death, who was also a young 19-year-old Black femme like myself, same age, I saw who was speaking up and on the front lines of police brutality and issues and leading protests in her city. I saw myself in that. And I think something, though, that was very unique about her situation, which I think we also should, like, bring this into the conversation of, like, the power of owning our stories and owning our narratives. I think, for one, Black women now, and young women, we're always preaching to them to, like, step into your power, use your voice. But then when we get to those positions and we start stepping in our power, we have to, like, worry about things like, one, being public facing, and, like, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for our safety? What does that mean for us being, like, respected as we move through our lives? But also, what does that mean to, like, what are we saying to other Black girls when we are pushing these Black women, Black femmes, to be at the front and center of these movements and marches, but then we aren't there to support them when they are the victims of this very same crimes that they're protesting? And so I think that's important. But I also think that one thing that Ms. Tonyan did that was, which I hope to see more of, is what I was speaking on in terms of the power of owning a narrative. Most of the time when we are taken by police, if our stories even get, or violence in general, when our stories get out there, oftentimes we aren't seeing images and pictures of ourselves that are actually reflective of our full humanity. And so, like, one thing she did that I was overly, I don't want to say inspired, but touched by was the fact that in the midst of her death, her life was able to be shown through these images that she took of herself and documented of herself on social media, on platforms. So like, I think both of those are like very important. It's like one of supporting these young Black leaders, young Black women, not just the ones who are public facing and leading marches, but also the ones who are in our boardrooms or who you work with or who are in your family. But then also on our end of like the power of owning our story and owning our narrative. And that's something I think that lasts even beyond our name and beyond it becoming a hashtag. And so I also want to touch on that and like bring that into the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People push us in front of these movements. And then when we're being, torn apart, not no one, there's a lot of people, let's be very careful because people do support us. But many of the same people who we expect, the people who pushed us out there, rooted us on, said, go out here and fight for us. They're not there when times get hard. So I agree with you. I think we have made a commitment to one another. I know you and I have, that we will always support one another no matter what. And you've been there when I was going through some really, really, really challenging times. And, and it makes me think that because I know you and I know what you've also experienced, it's not just about police murder. Excuse me. It's not just about, a Black women being killed. It's in life in general. We feel like at times we are left out to dry.
And we get beat down too, not just left out to dry. But when we speak up for ourselves, a lot of time we get attacked. And I mean, I noticed that too. If I interview a woman and she's had an experience that she wants to bring to the forefront, maybe she's been sexually assaulted, anything that she wants to say, it's so difficult for women. And I can understand why, because then I see people, oh, she's a thot. Well, she asked for it. Well, I don't believe her. And sometimes our stories just aren't believed. We're not supported. We're not encouraged to come out, even if we're not asking for anything, even if it doesn't involve a lawsuit or it doesn't involve finances or anything like that. It might just be you saying, this is what happened to me and I want to talk about it and it wasn't right. And I want other people to feel safe to be able to come and speak out, and you get attacked. And so, and Tamika, this is something that I always, when you talk about this, a lot of times what we're doing is not something that's going to happen overnight. And it's going to take months, years, decades of work. So, it is not something that you can do and not be able to have tough skin. There's times that you just feel like this is crazy. Like, I don't know if I can take it. It's just coming from everywhere. Who is here? And that's why it is so important for us to be able to have these safe spaces where we can tell our stories and also to support each other. Sometimes you feel like you're out there telling your story and there's no one that's like, I hear you. I believe you.
Right. Except for other Black women, for the most part, who are there. But, and that brings me to something else, Brea, that I know you can speak to, because you said something about it earlier. Our brothers, like who we love, who we hold, it feels like just like we want white people to deconstruct white supremacy, we need men, and particularly Black men, to deal with the issue of the abuse and the trauma that Black women suffer at their hands. I mean, that's just a fact. It's not about bashing men. It's just, we know that our brothers play a role at times in the pain against us. And when we're talking about feminine forward, right? This panel is called Femme Forward. Does that mean that men are excluded from our struggle?
Absolutely not. And we have to be able to apply it to ourselves. Like in the same way that we can tell white people, like, we need you to be allies, because actually this is your fight. Like, white folks created white supremacy, not us. So that's their fight. The same way patriarchy was created by men. Even if Black men weren't always able to profit off of it, there is still that hierarchy that this world, like, that's the reality of the world we live in. And I think we're so used to being in a space where, Black men go out into a world that doesn't affirm them, doesn't love them, doesn't protect them. And then they come home and Black women are that punching bag that, like, I need to get this out. And that's not okay, because we're dealing with the same racism, the same systems. We're further invisibilized by it, but we're dealing with those same systems. So we need Black men to see us as a part of this as a part of their fight, and for them to see themselves as a part of our fight. I said Black women keep making these love letters to Black men. I mean, Black Lives Matter, the hashtag, was founded by 3 Black women following the death of Trayvon Martin. So even though it is about all Black lives, ultimately it was created to affirm and honor Black boys and men. And do we see, like, it has to be Black women creating the hashtag Say Her Name. It has to be Black women saying, find our girls. Like, where are the men who are gonna come together and say, not here? And I know there are some there, and we work with some of them, but I also feel like we get too caught up in the politics of it that says, okay, we got to go up against policy, but we're not going to check our own personal interactions. Mm-hmm. Like, what are Black men doing to talk about intimate partner violence? When we were, I remember this when we were doing hashtag Take a Knee, and it was like, we were trying to get Black men to talk. Yes, we care about Colin Kaepernick being blackballed, but we should have been had some problems about the way that NFL has domestic violence so rampantly, and the way that NFL players can harm or kill their partners, and that's not as big news as whether they take a knee on the field. And we want that to be in the same breath as they're saying, don't take this Black man's job. You know, like we're looking for that same vigor, that same energy that years later, we got people still going on Twitter talking about, not until Cap gets a job, but we would be okay with that, and we wouldn't have those demands around what the culture around women is. And that's where that culture comes from. It's not necessarily, okay, let's get some legislation changed. That's important too, but we need homies to check each other. Like, we need men to be like, you ain't gonna do that in front of me. Right. And we need people to stop. Like, I get the urge to record it and document it so that we can share it with the world, but also who's stepping in to say, I'm not gonna wait until the end of this video and post it with the hashtag. Like, I'm going to stop the violence in the act. And that's, I think, real time.
Yeah, and and I feel like I started posting a lot of videos. I've stopped at this point because it just became taxing. I started to post videos showing Black women in real serious situations, fighting for themselves against other men, women in the store, the man behind the counters cursing her out, treating her like trash. And there were brothers standing around in many of these situations with women being beaten, being hurt, and people are standing around. They're filming, they're laughing. Even there's a video out right now, I know you saw it, Yee, where the young girl is hit in the face with the skateboard. And the
guys are laughing who are filming it. Like, it's ridiculous. Laughing.
Absolutely. So Camilla sent a question that I want to ask you, Kimberly, because I know people have said you look like the angry Black woman, right? You touched on that. So how does that feel? Is that okay with you? And the person asked the question here, should we be working to change it? She's talking about in the workplace, but I'm going to paraphrase and switch it up a little bit. But in the workplace, people say, angry Black women, that's a syndrome that we have to deal with all the time. And it's also that way in our movements, especially when we have these outbursts. That's what they like to call it. They said I had an outburst. I saw that in an article somewhere. No, I was telling the truth, but whatever. Do we say, let's change that? Do we work on it? Or do we own it and just say, yeah, I'm angry as hell?
I say we own it and just say I'm angry as hell. I think it's massively insulting to act as if though Black women's anger isn't warranted, as if though we haven't suffered in a way that warrants the way in which we respond. If you push me down to the ground and your expectation is that I'm supposed to roll over on my back, look again, because that's not what you're gonna get from me. I'm gonna stand up, and I'm gonna stand up for myself. So I'm just like, in terms of what they're saying in the workplace, they have to think about the fact that, they talk about racism and they want to like center it around the person wearing the KKK hat, but what they don't really dig into is on the daily indignities, the implicit bias that we have to deal with. I've sat in work meetings a million times and everybody treated me as if though the answer couldn't lie with me, and I know why that is, and they may not want to, they want to pretend like they don't know why it is, but I know why it is. And so that's always my issue with everything. As a writer, I always start my story with the why. Like, what is this person's motivation? Not what they're doing, but why they're doing it. And I think that's the thing that we haven't done historically, is look at why. Okay, you want to say Black women are angry? All right, then. Why, okay? Why?
Listen,
Almost
don't
crazy.
get in trouble with my black people up here saying, they already told me don't say curse words. I'm like,
right.
oh, shoot. That's how I make my point good.
But you know, that's my question. We never look at the why. So if we're looking at this narrative that Black women are angry, then somebody needs to step up to the plate and say, okay, why, sis? Why are you upset? What's going on? What have you seen? What have you experienced? What did that work day look like? What did that coworker say to you? What did that superior say to you? So for people, I've heard all day, every day that I was just an angry Black woman screaming at the top of my lungs, and people have cut my video up to their liking to be able to say she's just crazy and tell them to burn the city down. And I'm like, you're missing the whole point. My point is we're not dealing with the why. And when you don't deal with the why, then you'll be back here again. And yeah, Black women, a lot of us are angry, but it's warranted. And I don't understand this expectation of us to continue to be bulldozed over, and that we're supposed to just sit and take it. I don't get that. I'm still waiting on somebody to give me an answer on that.
Winter, do you experience that when you're out pushing in society and telling people the truth? Do they call you an angry young Black woman?
Yeah. But I think I also push back, just like you say, it's warranted. I say it's righteous, and that my anger is very righteous in the moment, which is another reason why you should be listening. I also feel like the issue of Black women not being listened to is something that, like, this is not just like surface level, like basic little like microaggressions or somebody don't want to listen to me. This is actually like deeply rooted into, like, baked into the soil of this country. Like, we can't, like you're saying, like, go back into history. Like, let's go back into history and, like, look at where the mammy caricatures came from and why they actually intentionally would depict the Black woman as undesirable, as someone who was not of a certain caliber of intelligence, when in reality, like, we can say that was because Black women at that time was also threatening the white woman in their relationships. And so, like, these, like, the ways that systemically, but also just, like, very intentionally, the image of the Black woman has been construed over hundreds of years is, like, one that we're still dealing with today. So, like, when people are coming to me or when people are attacking Black women in general, like, we have to also understand this is not just a 2020 issue, a 2019 issue. This is an issue that has gone back since before I was even thought of. And so when we think about solutions, think about, like, where do we go from here and what does the world look like, we have to address the ways that subconsciously we are all conditioned to think of Black women as less than. Like, the work to be anti-racist, we have to do that same constant active work to be anti-misogynist and anti-misogynorist, if that can be a phrase. And so, yeah, I think, yes, like, to answer your question, yes, it's something I deal with, but also I step into my anger and my emotions. I think that's where the power comes from. But I also think this is not just a 2020 issue, and this is an issue that is just very deeply rooted, and we have to address that.
Yeah. And, it's steep right here in Kentucky where I am, right? How could a woman be killed March 13th? March 13th, shot to death in her home. And if it was not for the fact that Ben Crump called some of us and said, help, we need to get attention on this case, we wouldn't have even known it. Like, you don't get a bulletin at work. I mean, I know this is a dumb question, but I'm just asking because you don't get a bulletin or something that says, like, all this happened that includes, like, Black woman shot. Like, it's not important to anybody.
A lot of the stories that I report on, I actually look for because I do a lot of my own research at work. So, like, even when we did the Carrier Horn story the other day, that was me, like, intentionally saying, okay, let me make sure I put this story in. Sometimes the headline news, and a lot of it is controlled by the media, like what is in the headline news, because some of those stories really do get buried, because every morning I might look on 10 different websites and I might see, like, a little blurb on something and be like, let me dig, deeper into this because I didn't really see this anywhere else. But it's also the coverage, like, what are people choosing to cover and what stories are they choosing to elevate? And if that means that we have to be the ones that really make that conscious effort to find these stories that are buried, that aren't being highlighted, then that's something I think that's really important that I've been trying to make a conscious effort to do.
So that's something, because we know as we're, winding down here, we have to ensure that we're giving people action items. Mm-hmm. And there are people who are journalists, either because they work there on TV, journalists because they're writers, journalists because they're on social media all day long and they have a story to tell and people are actually listening. There's all types of journalism today. Some of it we respect as being high level. Other things could be a little, different, but we accept different. But it's a little different. That's something that journalists and writers and people in media can do, is to ensure that they're digging a little bit deeper, because we see, I watch the news and I see, especially in the local news, again, if in that editing department earlier in the day, they didn't choose these particular stories, right, it may or may not be discussed. And when it is
who's working there, right, that chooses these stories also, I think that's important too. It's not representative of us. Even with the Say Her Name, I was like, let me look at all these different Black women who have been killed by the police. And there's so many stories that I never even heard of. And even when you introduced us to Breonna Taylor's mother, Tamika, I had to go back and look at all the different facts, because that wasn't something that I was seeing when I was reading the story. A lot of people were like, oh, I heard about it, but I didn't know this is everything that happened. That's important.
Yeah, no, the newsroom is definitely a problem, because that's how the media, that's how our stories are being told. And someone said to me before that it's not just an issue of, we as a community are not paying attention to Black women. It's also that the information is not always accessible. And so I think another step that we can take, these are like real tangible things. Can we get the people who are representing us in the media, who are calling us? Everybody's calling now. What can I do? What can I do? How can I do it? You could do a better job of covering the stories of Black women. You could also make sure that when they're calling Kimberly an angry Black woman, that you bring her on your show so she can explain for herself what it is that she feels. When I was in the midst of like real true hell, y'all know what I've been through. It was my interview with you, Yee, on the Breakfast Club, with the family there, where I was able to really explain myself, that began to help turn the tide. But too often, some of the people who are supposed to be representing us in the media are too afraid to even touch our stories, or just too ignorant to actually do the work for themselves. So I think that's one thing. I also think helping our family, not just older people, because we have this thing that it's only elderly people that follow fake news. No, it's all of our people that share bad stories, that don't know how to determine what information they're putting out there. And we need to help our people with that, because it's a problem, and it's going to be even more of a problem as we head towards a presidential election where we need everybody to show up and vote. So I think those are two things. Anybody else have one you want to drop now, and then we'll go back and cover another one? Looks like y'all look like Brea and Kimberly look like,
I'm like, wait, tag me in. No, I mean, I think one thing that really, going back to what y'all said earlier, I think the phrase of the last couple of years has been trust Black women, listen to Black women, until it's time to really trust Black women and listen to Black women. And to your point, Tamika, I think watching you and Linda and Carmen and what y'all experienced after leading Women's March really made me so jaded about whether we can work with white women and whether we can be in community with people who are not willing to actually protect us. Because it was so confusing to me that the same people that called you in and said, we can't do this without you, sis, we have to have your lens, we need your relationships. Then when it was all of the misinformation and all of the attacks, it was like, ooh, that might have to be you on your own. And I remember talking to my mom after you went on The View, and she was like, I can't believe that, Megan, we got to do something for Tamika and da 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 da. But it's like, it's only Black women saying that. Like, what can we do? And so to the point of what people on this call can do, if you're a philanthropist and you have access to resources and you're not leveraging that towards Black women on the forefront who need security, who need cybersecurity support, who need like real protection, not like, oh, I'm going to tweet you out and get you some followers, but like, no, when I'm in the airport by myself and I'm in Kentucky and somebody recognizes me and like, that's the kind of support we have to be willing to do. That's what Toyin didn't get. That's what a lot of our Black leaders don't get. And especially I'm a student of history. Like, I love to research the movements that came before me, and I see us falling into those same traps of FBI, COINTELPRO, where we're allowing right-wing and white conservative media to frame our view of our leaders, and we're not doing enough to step up for them. So I think that we just all need to be doing more. Like, it shouldn't just be activists or personal friends saying, I stand with Tamika, I stand with, it needs to be everybody coming together and saying, in the same breath that I was sharing your viral video, I need to be reminding people like, we ride for her. Like, we're not letting you erase her and her work. And I think that is what's sorely missing. And you can't tell Black women to step up and to have their voices heard if you're not going to provide that protection, because I'm not going to be anybody's martyr. I just won't.
Yeah, I definitely
Kimberly, I see someone here from the gathering. I just want to say, I see someone here in the comments saying that it's all about, it still goes back to policing Black women's tones and emotions, and that's a fact. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Yes, I think that, you know, a lot of times people are asking what it is that they can do, and they are compartmentalizing that they need to mimic something that they're seeing. There's something that we all can be doing. You know, if you know what's going, if you have time on your hand, then you need to look at what's going on with the judges and the DAs in your district. You need to see which one of them are giving harsher sentences to Black and brown people. You need to look at some of these cases where people have not been convicted. When you're looking at people like, you know, Jumaane Robinson, who that case hasn't had anything rectified about it in 4 years. Like, you need to look at those cases, look at those DAs and judges. And guess what? We wish the movement had, you know, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff 50 years ago. You can post those judges' records. You can post those DAs' records. And if you're seeing that the people in your area are running unopposed, then you need to look through the community and see who it is who's a viable candidate. And y'all all need to put y'all little pennies together and go ahead and it really doesn't cost that much to run a local election. I ran a very successful local election a few years ago. I only had $10,000 and we came in second place to an incumbent. We were that close to taking that seat. And so, you know, it's like, we don't all have to be working on the same project. If somebody needs, you know, somebody to lead a march, Beyonce already told y'all she's gonna call Tamika. So let Tamika do that. You know what I mean? But it's like, if you have a young candidate that you need to run, then that's what I do. Call me and I'll figure out how to get some money for that young candidate. I'll figure out how to get the training, you know, done for them. One of my mentors, my big sister, Yanaja Lone Wolf, I march with Yo all the time, but Yo know I ain't putting no march together. But if she knows there's a young hot candidate out there, she'll shoot them my information and be like, my little sister will help you figure it out.
That's right. Stay in your lane. You said pick people to run. You might need to run yourself. You may be successful. You also need to run again. And everybody else on here needs to be running for something. Angela Yee needs to be running for like whatever to do with Black businesses, because she builds them and knows how to maintain them. And people don't talk about that. People look at Angela and think that she's just on the radio. Angela has businesses, multiple in different cities across America, where she's maintaining them as a young, strong Black woman on her own. So wherever it's the economic development piece, controllers and things like that, we need you over there.
No, and I work with the Small Business Administration in New York with the small business services, and I do all kinds of things with them to make sure people know what services are available. And I'm always very much like, look, this is what you need to do. You want to get your business started. Everything that I want to do has to do with like literacy, with nutrition, with owning businesses and all of that. So that's something I know. I do a lot of that work outside of the Breakfast Club. But it's always great to me when people come up to me and be like, oh, I came to you, and I do a Wealth Wednesday once a month at the Juice Bar, where we bring in people to talk about finances. And you know how important that is to me. And I always try to make sure that I actually pay that knowledge for it. But if any of y'all run for office, let me know. We will have you on the Breakfast Club. Get your campaign off like that. It is not a problem.
So Winter, you can give us some closing words on this whole point. Like, what is something that people can be doing? How do we ensure that this protest movement continues? And you know, and some people want to say, well, when the protests end. I don't want the protests to end. I don't want the protests to end. Stay in the streets, continue to organize. You don't got to do it every night, but hey, we should be figuring out when we can come together. It doesn't have to be 5,000 people. You know, we know how to have 100 people and walk from New York City to Washington, D.C. to make a point. we did that, 250 miles. And so we can figure out 10 people how to make some noise outside of elected officials, so-and-so house, if they don't seem to think that our needs need to be met. So Winter, tell us some good words. We want to hear from you. You probably are the youngest person on this panel, but you're extremely powerful, Winter, and we see big things happening for you, because I know you're going to be leading this generation, and you're leading already. You're already doing it.
I appreciate that, because I look up to everyone on this call so much. And in terms of just action items, not to regurgitate what's already been said, but y'all, like, as we know, don't be listening to Black women, so I'm going to regurgitate a tiny bit. I think the first thing is to listen to Black women. I mean, when we think about the fact that Black women and the maternal death rates are like exponentially greater than those of our white counterparts, it's because Black women aren't being listened to. And even when we're advocating boldly and loudly and are angry for ourselves. So the everyday practice of listening and centering the voices of Black women. But also with that, like you touched on, like young Black women, I think that's another thing. Like I'm really big, I know I'm young, but even like the folks younger than me, it's like I think it's important that we're investing in them, especially when the systems and our public school systems and the infrastructures aren't already doing that on their own. As a community, we have to come together and make sure that we're investing in our young 4, 5, 6, 7, all throughout school youth, young Black women, because it is true that they will be the ones leading, and they are leading now. And if we don't do that work to invest in them and make sure that they are able to step into their power when they become of age and ready to do that, then we lost, because Black women, Black femmes, Black trans women have been at the forefront and are some of the strongest voices that we have out there. And with that, I also think, like Brea touched on, in terms of like resources and money, very important. Like Miss Tonian was in the position she was in because she wasn't taken care of by her community and didn't have the basic necessities met. And so when you see the GoFundMe or you see the Cash App and young Black women are needing support, like that's when we do that. And that's when we make sure that, yeah, if we only have $1 or $2 or $3, like I'm a broke college student. I'm out here like spending my unemployment on like every other GoFundMe and Cash App I see, but like making sure that like those things matter, and those tangible ways of standing behind young Black women in general, are like ways that we propel the world into a better place, because we're doing that work and Black women are leading the charge. And we've been here fighting for ourselves, but not just ourselves, because we know when we're free, then everybody gonna be free. So invest in us.
And when I think about, say, I'm like you, I'm not a broke college student, but I'm a broke working person. And I have been giving money to everybody, Cash App. If I see it, I just give. One lady wrote on my page the other day, she said, Tamika, I need your help so that I can promote this march. We're doing this local. She said, I'm not asking for any money. And I wrote her back and said, it's okay to ask for money. That's another thing that they have tried to make us feel like we shouldn't raise money. We shouldn't have access to capital so that we can do work. No, we should be able to ask for money. And guess what? We cannot ask the same people we're fighting to fund us. We can't do that. So our people, if you want us to stay independent, where we could talk that talk and Kimberly could be out there saying what needs to be said, that's only going to happen if you're given the $10, $15, $20. So you need to make sure you find all of these ladies, Brea Baker, Winter Breanne, Kimberly, Latrice Jones, and go to the juice bar, support the businesses that Angela Yee has, and Angela's businesses are not like ranky dank, because we love to be like, it's rank. No, it's beautiful. She has a beautiful bathroom.
Yeah, Tamika made it there. Yeah,
that I went to, but it's also about health and wealth. Find these folks and invest in them. You can invest in Until Freedom. There's so many organizations out here that need the support. And yes, there's a lot of organizations. We're not going to, one organization can't do it. It takes a lot of people, and there's a big movement on the ground. And the more decentralized that we are, the less that they are able to infiltrate our movements and take us out. So yes, if you only have $20, give $5 to 4 organizations and help everybody if you can. What y'all think?
I'm with you.
I'm here for it.
I agree.
Hey, now, I want to hear from the folks from MBIB. It's 8 o'clock. I know we got on a little late. You know, we can talk forever, but if you all just let me know whether or not it's time for us to shut our mouths and get off.
And I do want to stress this, and just for you ladies to know, like, one thing that really helps me is, like, Ben Crump always sends me stories. Whenever he's doing something, he'll DM it to me so I know what's going on. If there's anything you feel like I need you to highlight this, just send it to me. And there's people that have sent me stuff that I didn't see in the news. And I'm like, okay, send me a link so I can understand what this is so that I can highlight those stories too, because I'm very into that. Even if it's just I'm not at work and I could put it on Twitter or whatever it is, and any way that I can do those things, people will tell you, like, I'm very open to doing things like that.
Thank you.
You always are. And when people get in trouble, they can call you as well. So, Kimberly, I guess it's time for us to check out. But I do want to say to you, just because I've been where you are, having these moments when everybody is watching you, that the world loves to build you up, to tear you down. Mm-hmm. And so in this moment, enjoy the fact that you were able to tell our truth. And also just know that we have your back. If you need support from us, we have your back, and we'll be there, because they do not like unapologetic Black women, which I know you know that already, but just know that if there's a storm, we'll be here to hold you down and make sure that you're good.
I appreciate that, Queens, and likewise. And you have been, and I just want to say to you, while I have this moment, you have been a guiding light for all of us for so long, and we appreciate you, and we love you, and we want you to always have your flowers right now.
Yes.
Y'all saying I'm old and I'm done. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm not gonna do this with you. I'm there looking younger than me in winter.
Talking. Look like it. Look young, Tamika, but you got a lot of it. You are what we call seasoned. Seasoned, and yes, you got seasoning.
Bree is pushing me on over to the side. Y'all just make sure y'all put a blanket on me when I'm in the house. Give me a blanket, okay? Don't leave. Thank y'all so much. We are so powerful. This is such a powerful, amazing group. Listening to you all, I know that even if I am old or seasoned or whatever it is, the movement
it's a good thing.
Yes, it's in your hands.
It's a good thing.
Fact that we're still alive today, because some of our sisters didn't make it to be here to tell their story. So, love you all. Peace. Thank you, my Black is beautiful.
All right, stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you.
Love you all.